who you think should know about citizen science and the debris tracker project. So let me take a look at the chat. We got Heritage Public Library in rural Virginia. Very cool. That's awesome. And don't forget to select all panelists and attendees when you say hello. And oh, one more thing you all should keep in mind. The fact that we are recording this and you all are communicating with us in the chat, things you put in the chat, we may, read it out to the crowd, or we may say, oh, Nancy from Seattle is in the room with us today. We might engage in that kind of communication with you. So that's just something to keep in mind. It'll be available in the recording later. And we're officially live on YouTube. I'm going to put the link in the chat in case you want to share it with anybody. So let me just add it there. And I'm actually going to tweet that link. So in case there are any last minute attendees who might just happen upon it, we can help spread the word about citizen science and libraries and all those good things. It looks like someone's joining us from Toms River, New Jersey. Very cool. Great to know. Welcome, welcome. I'm calling in from West Palm Beach today in Florida. So just really happy to have you all here. We have an environmental artist from Maryland here. That's great. And if you all could include your zip codes in there, it's just really helpful for us because we're able to know, kind of like who we're reaching. It helps us keep track of our impact. It's just really, really helpful if you include those zip codes. So thank you so much for that. Let's see, anyone else joining us in the chat? We got a zip code. We got our first zip code. Thank you for sharing. And we have another zip code, someone joining from Old Orchard Beach. I'm going to Google that. Where's that? That's so cool. Oh, it's in Maine. Very cool. We got a real, people from all over. Someone from Du Bois, Indiana. And we got a Virginian in the room with us today. So I'm just getting our link tweeted out. We're going to start promptly in about 1 minute. And we're right on time. So I think we're going to go ahead and get started without further ado. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's present this webinar. Let me go back to our first slide. So hello, everyone. Welcome to Citizen Science and Libraries. This is a series that SciStarter is conducting in partnership with the network of the National Library of Medicine, the All of Us Research Program, and the awesome affiliate citizen science projects that have been joining us to share their wisdom and their passion for public engagement and research. My name is Caroline Nickerson. I'm with the SciStarter team. And I'm so delighted to be your MC today. We are very passionate about accessibility. So we have ASL interpreters on the line, that stands for American Sign Language. And we also have closed captioning for this event. You'll need to turn those closed captions on in the Zoom room for them to show up. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, we monitor the Zoom chat a little bit more than we monitor the YouTube comments. So if you're trying to get in touch with us, please join us on Zoom so we can make sure to communicate with you. We'll be monitoring this chat throughout the event, the Zoom chat, and we do ask that when you put something in the chat, you select all panelists and attendees so everybody can be a part of the discussion. If you haven't yet, introduce yourself in the chat, say hello, put your zip code in there. Adding your zip codes helps us keep track of who we're reaching and where our impact is. So that's just really helpful for us. And I love seeing all these people who have been filtering in the chat so far. We have people from Western Massachusetts. We have people from Largo, Maryland, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We got someone from Williamsburg. Very, very cool. Someone who's an educator in Toms River, New Jersey. That's amazing. Oh, and we have a Gainesville, Florida person. That's where I went to school. Go Gators. I'm assuming the person from Gainesville is a Gator. But yeah, keep on introducing yourself in the chat. We're just so delighted to have you all here to be able to talk to you about the Debris Tracker project today and how you can fight plastic pollution through citizen science. So I'm going to pass the mic to my colleague Emily from the network of the National Library of Medicine, Pacific Northwest region, to give you a little bit of housekeeping about today's session. Emily, take it away.
Thank you, Caroline. So today's talk is going to be structured in two parts. The first hour of this webinar is for anyone interested in hearing about citizen science, the Citizen Science Project Debris Tracker, and asking questions. Part 2, or the last 30 minutes of the webinar, is designed for librarians, educators, and community organizers, and will provide tips for engaging your community in citizen science projects. Everyone is welcome to stay for both parts of the webinar, and we're going to give a clear cue when we're transitioning from part 1 to part 2, just in case you can't stay for the second part of the webinar. Before we dive into the presentation, I'm going to go over a few housekeeping things. Next slide, please, Caroline. So the session is being recorded, and the recording will be posted to YouTube. We're providing ASL interpretation and closed captioning. The co-hosts are going to be monitoring the chat throughout this session, so please share any questions or comments in the chat box and share those to all participants. Questions will be collected and addressed during the Q&A session. If you're a librarian and are interested in obtaining Medical Library Association continuing education credit for this session, you'll complete the evaluation provided at the end of part 2, and we'll provide more information about that at the end of the session. And now I'm going to hand things back over to Caroline.
Yeah, everyone, thank you so much, Emily, for that. This is my additional plea for you to include your zip codes in the chat. It really does help. It helps us keep track of things. So if you haven't done that yet, if you haven't said hello to us in the chat, make sure you do that today. So first up, we have some polls because we just want to get to know you a little bit and know a little bit about your background so we can tailor this presentation as much as possible to serve you. So our first question for you today is, have you ever participated in a citizen science project before? There are no wrong answers here. If you haven't done it before, you are in the right place to learn how you can immediately get started with the Marine Debris Tracker project. If you have, that's awesome. Let us know in the chat what project you've done. We're always curious. And if you're unsure, that's okay too. You're going to get some clarification today about how you can get started. So I'm seeing some answers pour in. It looks like we have about 32% of respondents who have participated in a citizen science project before. We have about 60% who haven't, which is really exciting for me because I get to spread the word to you all today and help you all discover this new topic. And we have a few people who are unsure, which is great too. So I'm going to give you a few more seconds to vote. We're going to go 3, 2, 1, and we're going to end the poll. I'm going to share my results. Yeah, so it looks about like 62% of you haven't done citizen science before. We have about 32% of you who have, and a few of you who are unsure. No wrong answers. We're just so happy you're here today to discover new things with us. So I'm going to stop sharing the results now so we can go to our next poll. So now we just want to know, who are you? We want to know a little bit more about you. Are you an aspiring citizen scientist? Are you a parent of an aspiring citizen scientist? Are you a teacher, an educator, a troop leader, etc.? Are you a librarian or part of a library staff? Are you a researcher or a project leader? Are you just a bored person on the internet? That's okay too. I hope that this presentation entertains you today and makes you a little bit less bored. Or are you none of these? Oh my gosh, and I'm looking at the results coming in. It looks like the librarians and the library staff members, they are in full force today. About 78% of you who have voted so far, librarians are part of a library staff. We have one lone researcher on the line. We have a few educators. We have some parents. We have some aspiring citizen scientists. No bored people on the internet. That's surprising. Usually at least one person clicks that one. And we have a few of you who are none of these, which is okay too. So I'm going to give you a few seconds more to vote. 3, 2, 1, and I'm going to end the poll. And as I share those results, I'm going to take another quick look in the chat. It looks like a few of you have done eBird and iNaturalist before, which is awesome. Some of you have done programs at your library, fantastic. And oh my gosh, one of you is looking to build a new citizen science page on your library website. You are in the right place. We have resources you can include on that page for sure. A big part of this event, as Emily told you earlier today, is we want to make it so the people who stick around for the leadership breakout group could facilitate a program like this with other people. You could galvanize others to be involved in science, to be involved in citizen science. So I'm going to stop sharing the results there, and we're going to go to our next slide. Thank you so much, everyone, for doing our polls today. So citizen science, you've heard this term a lot, even though we're just at the beginning of the presentation, and you might be wondering, what is it anyway? I like to think of it as a collaboration between scientists and those of us who are curious, concerned, and motivated to make a difference. So that just means you're volunteering your time to move science forward. You're turning your own curiosity into real world impact. And citizen science is so diverse. It's everything from astronomy and monitoring light pollution to testing water quality to doing health research by playing a game to analyze data. There's so much out there in terms of citizen science. It's really as diverse as science itself. It spans every single discipline. You can be collecting data, analyzing data, whatever you're doing, you're contributing to a real project creating knowledge. And on SciStarter, we are your connector. We want to connect you to the real science you can do, the scientists and the researchers who need your help. And a great place to get started is scistarter.org/NLM. So at this point in the presentation, I always ask folks, minimize that Zoom window, open up your web browser, and type in scistarter.org/NLM. I'll also put the link in the chat. This is where you can create your SciStarter account and discover a bunch of other cool stuff too. So I hope you all are typing in this link right now. The link is in the chat too. Click that link, go over the SciStarter, and on the left side of that page, you can make your SciStarter account. So make sure you do that. Also on that page, you'll be able to discover the Introduction to Citizen Science tutorial. This was made in partnership with the network of the National Library of Medicine and Arizona State University. This tutorial gives you the what, the how, the who, and the why of citizen science. You can click through it. There are videos, there's a quiz at the end. There are quiz questions throughout actually, and you actually get a certificate upon completion. It was written to be accessible to everyone. It's written at a 5th grade level, so it appeals to intergenerational learners. So maybe you have an aunt or an uncle or just a person in your life, maybe a student who you think they would really like citizen science. They want to get involved and they want to turn their curiosity about the world and the impact. You could just give them this link to the scistarter.org/NLM page, and they could click through this tutorial in English or in Spanish to get oriented to this whole new world and discover all these new resources. So I really recommend this tutorial for yourself. Even if you know a little bit about citizen science, you might learn something new with this tutorial, as well as for the people in your life or the communities you might be trying to introduce to citizen science. Also on this page, we have a handout that's linked to on the scistarter.org/NLM page. We have an area for our fall event series, a handout created by actually Emily, who you heard from earlier today. It's all about plastic pollution. It links to some resources like Medline Plus, Kids Environment, Kids Health, and also to resources where you can learn more about Debris Tracker. So I recommend downloading this handout, clicking through the links linked to on the handout, and hopefully using these with your community to introduce others to citizen science. And this handout is available on the scistarter.org/NLM page. Now, this is my favorite part of the presentation. I'm able to pass the mic to our esteemed guest, Catherine Youngblood from the Marine Debris Tracker Project. This is one of the featured projects on the scistarter.org/NLM page, where you can actually use the power of citizen science to take action and monitor plastic pollution, to shed light on a global problem. So I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen now so Catherine can start sharing hers, and I'll let her introduce herself and introduce the project. Take it away, Catherine.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Caroline. We're very excited to get to be the featured project for this presentation today. And I'm happy to get to talk to you guys a little bit more about Marine Debris Tracker. So like Caroline said, my name is Catherine Youngblood. I'm a research engineer at the University of Georgia and the Citizen Science Director for the Marine Debris Tracker Project, which is a citizen science app used to collect geospatial data on litter all around the world. So the Marine Debris Tracker was originally developed in 2010 in collaboration with NOAA and the University of Georgia. And we're now glad to be powered by Morgan Stanley, in addition to lots of collaboration and support from National Geographic. So what is Debris Tracker? So it's an app that is free, accessible for anybody to download on their smartphone. And then people use it in different places around the world to go out and collect data on what kind of litter they're seeing in their own communities. So we're building a global open database of different kinds of litter items around the world using this smartphone technology. So we've made a little bit of progress on that goal to date. We have about 2.5 million items logged in our database, and that number is growing every day. We're getting really, really close to 3 million, and that's in 92 different countries around the world. So we're really trying to expand this database, and plastic pollution looks different in different places around the world. And so our goal is to be able to look at the differences and the similarities and really create a very specific look at plastic pollution that's specific to an individual community. That's not just this, far away, far removed beach somewhere in the world, but that's really in our own backyards, that's starting in our own communities. So I'm going to play this video for you guys. Actually, let me stop sharing and make sure that I got the sound share on here. Yeah, all right. Perfect. So I'm going to share this video really quickly and show you guys a little bit of inspiration on what Debris Tracker is and what we're trying to do with this project.
I fell in love with the study of solid waste because it so closely involves people. Every day we decide what to buy, what to consume, and then we have to choose if we're going to recycle something, compost something, or put it in the trash. Unfortunately, some of our items still end up in the environment. Every minute, the equivalent of a dump truck worth of plastic enters our oceans.
As researchers, we study plastic pollution all around the world, and this is a global problem. But I think there's this tendency to think of it as something that's far away and far removed from us. But there's nowhere on the planet that's not touched by the water cycle. So plastic pollution can start right in our own backyards. But so can the solutions. Scientists need data on what's ending up in the environment so that we can use that data to inform upstream solutions. But they can't collect this data without your help.
The first iteration of Marine Debris Tracker was actually on a personal digital assistant. My students went out and collected litter items with exact GPS coordinates, and we could look at the distribution and change of litter on a coastline over time. When smartphones came out, it became possible to collect this type of data on a wider scale, and so we thought there should be an app for that.
Debris Tracker is an open data citizen science movement. We're committed to sharing our data because we believe this problem will be solved more quickly when we work together. When you use the app, the geospatial litter data you collect is uploaded to our publicly accessible database. Scientists, policymakers, educators, or anyone around the world can download and analyze your data to inform their solutions. There's power in numbers, which is why we rely on a community of people just like you to collect this data. The app is free and easy to use, so anyone can become a citizen scientist.
Wherever you are in the world, every piece of data that you collect is a piece of the puzzle illustrating the plastic pollution problem.
So please join our open data citizen science movement by collecting litter in your community today. And help us answer these 3 questions. What is it? How did it get there? And together, what can we do about it?
All right. So that said what I said earlier, but in a more eloquent fashion. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of what the Debris Tracker project is all about. I'm going to go through really quickly a run through of how to use the app and how to actually get started collecting data, but I wanted to make sure you guys are aware of our resources online. So we have a full guide available on our website as well as a tutorial video. So these will go through how to use the app and how to fix any bugs you might run into in a bit more detail, but I'll show you the basics today, so you should be able to get started. So basically, all you have to do is download the app and click Start Tracking, and then you'll see a list of a bunch of different organizations. So we've really We've supported local data collection through hosting these customized data lists for different organizations around the world. For you guys, I would definitely recommend the NOAA data list. This is the most commonly used in the US context. In North America, it's a really widely accepted methodology, the list that they've created. So you can click on that NOAA list to get started. As I mentioned, you'll see a bunch of other lists. Some of them are in different languages. We have Spanish, Indonesian, Russian, a bunch of different options there if you do need other lists as well. But once you click click the info icon and look at more information about a specific organization or a project. Most of them are focused on a specific geographic area, or they have a specific methodology that they're using. But the NOAA list is very open-ended. You can use it anywhere in the world, any kind of method you want to use to collect the data. So basically all you do is once you've opened up the data and created an account, as we mentioned earlier, you can access this through SciStarter as well as through, you can create your own account through an email or a password and then link your SciStarter account later as well. But once you've created that account, all you do is record what you see. So you can use these up and down arrows and these numbers to record the number of litter items, and then you can click on that number of items, and every time you click add, you're creating a geospatial data point. So you're creating a point on that big global community map that we have of what litter looks like around the world. And once you're done, you can also submit that session and upload it to the database. So we have an option here of save session as well. And so that allows for offline tracking mode. So we do have people who track in kind of remote places. We've had people log on sailboats in the middle of the ocean. So as long as you've opened up the app before and downloaded the list, you can still track offline. Your phone has GPS service in most places. And then you can save that session and click this big submit button once you have access to Wi-Fi. If you've taken a lot of photos or otherwise done something that requires a lot of data, you can also save your session and then submit it when you have Wi-Fi if you don't want to upload it over a cell service data. And then once you've uploaded that data, you can check it out on our data platform. So we have all of this data, as I mentioned, is open data. So all of it's publicly available and accessible online. So you can look at data from different lists. You can look at all of the data together. You can look at your own data, and then you can get an idea of what are the top items, what are people seeing. As you'll notice here, this is a data pool of about a month of data, and plastic is the largest fragment by far of this data, and plastic fragments and cigarette butts and food wrappers were the most common things that we saw in this data set. So I'm also going to tell you a quick case study. As I mentioned, we have people who use this app around the world. It's a very much a global effort, and which is really important to building this bigger picture of plastic pollution. But we recently, last year in 2019, used it in our own research on an expedition with National Geographic up the Ganges River. So we started in the Bay of Bengal in Bangladesh, and we traveled up to the Himalayas to the source of the Ganges River. And along the way, we logged over 50,000 litter items in 10 different communities along the way. And we were able to see major differences in how those communities had litter, what kind of litter items those were, based on a lot of different characteristics. So while plastic pollution is a global issue, we do see a lot of differences on a community to community basis, and those are differences that we can also turn into solutions, turn into specific solutions for a community. Since you guys are also educators and librarians, I also wanted to make sure I shared our education resources. So as part of this effort where we were collecting data, we also went into schools and community groups and trained other people on collecting data as well. In total, we ended up with over 100,000 litter items because we had a lot of other people who were contributing data as well. As part of that, we developed some really exciting resources that I think will be really useful in the library context. So we have two different guides. One is a mobile application guide, which is kind of a general guide on how to use the app. teaches you all of those basics, what the project is, how to use it. And then we also have a plastic pollution action journal, which is geared towards younger kids and students. We developed this for about the middle school level, but I think it can be adapted for really any student. But it teaches kids to think about plastic pollution like we do as scientists. So kind of goes through the steps of understanding how we use plastic, gets kids to get out and track litter, collect data on the problem in their own community, and then to start thinking about solutions based on what they're seeing on the ground. Yeah, so I'm gonna stop there and we'll do Q&A, I believe, and then hop back onto the facilitation tips afterwards.
Yes, thank you so much, Catherine. And that was like a little teaser for you all for the leadership breakout group we're having at the end. So get excited for that. After our first hour, those of you who are interested in facilitating others to complete the project, you can stick around and get that instructional material that Catherine and my colleagues from NNLM will showcase. So thank you so much, Catherine, for giving us that introduction to Debris Tracker and how people can monitor plastic pollution anywhere in the world, not just on the coast. And oops, I'm going to skip ahead because you went through all your own slides. But now we are lucky enough to have a Q&A period, and I saw lots of questions coming through the chat. So I think people are really eager to learn more about the project. Nancy Scien from the Network of the National Library of Medicine will be facilitating the Q&A. So Nancy, do you want to kick us off with some questions for Catherine? And as Nancy asked her initial questions, everyone feel free to put additional questions in the chat for Nancy to pick from to pose to Catherine. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks, Carolyn. My name is Nancy Scien, and I am the NNLM PNR Research and Data Coordinator. And as Caroline had pointed out, I'm the facilitator for the Q&A period. So welcome to the Q&A period. You may recall that a week from today, and I think on a couple of days ago, you received an email from me asking you to brainstorm some questions to ask Catherine during the Q&A period. So based on the feedback we received from you, we have curated a list of questions to ask Catherine about her exciting work. And I also noticed some questions pop up during her presentation, so we'll also consider those questions as well. So the first question that somebody had sent in through email asks Catherine, would Debris Tracker be something that a library could make into a kids program? If so, do you have any tips on how to do that?
Yes, we're going to talk a little bit more about some facilitation tips afterwards, but I'll give you kind of a little sneak peek. So depending on the age group, you can definitely have kids track on the app. Really depends on how technology savvy they are, although most even really young kids are really good at technology, more so than a lot of us. So I think that's one option. We're also working on a paper data card that will be more for younger kids who it might be easier for them to tally data than record it on the app. So we're working on a version that would allow for kids to tally things on a paper data card, and then for you to be able to upload that data to our website so you're still sharing with this same database. So yes, it's definitely something that kids can use. We have a lot of engagement with educators and other groups like that, so we're definitely very much encouraging kids to use that. And that online upload feature should be live sometime next month, so that's coming very soon if that's something that's interesting to you.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Catherine. The next question asks, can a laptop work in place of a tablet for this app?
Yeah, so we are, as I mentioned, that online upload feature will allow for you to use a laptop. Right now, you do need to, if you're going to use the app, you have to track on a smartphone or a tablet that has GPS capabilities enabled. So this data is actually a really high quality data set for researchers because it's using your live smartphone location to record where the litter you're seeing is showing up. So that's a really high quality data set versus just kind of cleaning up a big area. We're able to get down to the nitty gritty of things that influence litter on the ground, like prevalence of trash cans and stores and those kind of things. So we're able to really get down to that level because it's using your smartphone GPS location to track where you're at while you're picking up while you're recording litter. But we do know that a lot of groups, especially groups working with kids, it's kind of hard to manage using a smartphone or using multiple smartphones while you're out in the field. So we're working on that online upload session, which means you can, track or collect things and then go back and count them and then give us your general area and still be sharing your data and contributing to the same database.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Catherine. The next question asks, is there a reason why the NOAA list is preferred over Surfrider Foundation or Heal the Bay?
Yeah, all of those are great lists. Surfrider and Heal the Bay are really awesome organizations we've been working with. They do tend to recruit their own volunteers, and they tend to, at least Heal the Bay works in its own geographical area based over in California, so it's not quite as widespread. But if you want to work with that particular organization, definitely do your research and you're welcome to a track on really most of the lists on the app are very open where you can track on any list. We just recommend the NOAA list as kind of a good general starting list.
Okay, awesome. And there's a few questions from the chat recently. One person asked, do you track microplastics in the ocean?
So we have had people tracking microplastics in the ocean. There is actually a protocol on the app with 5 gyres and EPA that they've developed that's a list for recording microplastics. However, like I mentioned, it is a little bit difficult to find those microplastics. So we haven't had as much microplastic collection as macroplastic. So all of those microplastics though are being generated from bigger litter items, from pieces of fabric that are fragmenting, or pieces of food wrapper, cigarette butts, all kinds of things, but that fragment into those smaller plastics. So we really value that upstream data set as well. That upstream data set of what kind of macro big litter items that we're finding in the environment that can lead to those microplastics. So yeah, the microplastics can be pretty hard it's more difficult data to collect, I guess is the summary answer for that. And there are a lot of people who are doing really exciting work there, but it is more difficult data to collect.
Oh, great. And there's another person from the chat who asks, are there concerns about data quality? If so, how do you handle them?
So we really believe that, people in a community who are collecting data on what they're seeing in the community are the experts. So, a lot of people, we really have made the app as easy to use as possible, tried to lower those barriers to entry as much as possible. And then, we really trust people who are going to take their time to record data on plastic pollution and other kinds of litter in their own communities, that they know what they're seeing and that they, can record that data. So I guess it's those two things of trying to make it as easily accessible as possible, trying to, make it as intuitive and as user-friendly as possible, which is still something we're continuing to evolve and work in doing. And then also just, we believe that the people in their own community recording data on what they're seeing in their community, those are the experts on what's there.
Okay, awesome. And there's a few more questions from our curated list. One person asks, what's something about Debris Tracker that has surprised you?
That's a good question. I think I've been really recently surprised by kind of the how many different groups find this app really interesting and exciting. So, we were developed very much as an educational tool, and we've been, using the app in our own research at the University of Georgia, but I think it's really exciting how many, classroom organizations and different nonprofit groups have found the app and want to be a part of it. I think it's really cool that so many people want to contribute to an open data set. That's something that's really exciting about Debris Tracker for me, is that all these organizations can come together and, they're all collecting data in different places in different ways, but that all of it can be part of this big data set that's, you know, really valuable from a scientific perspective. So I think it's been really surprising as a researcher. You don't think that people will get excited about the work that you're doing, but it's really cool to get to see, you know, how many different people in different places around the world want to be part of the solution and collect data on plastic pollution.
Okay, I have a couple of more questions and then we'll sum up the Q&A period. But the next question asks, what would you tell somebody who wants to participate in Debris Tracker but might be nervous about getting started?
Sure. So like I said, we've really made the app as easy to use as possible. So it's really, you know, it's as simple as going out in your own backyard. You don't have to be near a waterway. You don't have to be near the coast. Any data that you're collecting is valuable. And so we're really excited to see people, you know, tracking in their own neighborhood and in part of their, you know, on their daily walk or, you know, in their, as part of their typical routines, going out and collecting this data on what they're seeing. I think that is really a sustainable way to get citizen science data and is a sustainable way to build our database of where plastic pollution is in the world. So yeah, I think, you know, just start small, just start with, you know, collecting a few pieces of data on your daily walk. And, you know, maybe that leads to getting more people involved. Maybe that leads to a bigger cleanup effort, but really any data that you're contributing is super valuable on our end. So we're excited just to see people, you know, tracking out while they're out walking their dog. It doesn't have to be a major commitment.
And really quickly, I'm going to jump in here because I saw a question come in the chat. Mimi asked, are public schools require community service hours for kids? Is there a way for the student to show that they participated and for how long? Mimi, I'm going to make a shameless plug here for you to stick around for the facilitator section, because during that breakout group for leadership, we're going to talk about how on SciStarter, you can create a SciStarter list to share with your community. So when you, for example, add Debris Tracker to a list that you've created on SciStarter, you're able to see the number and the frequency of contributions by people with public SciStarter accounts to your list. And those analytics are only available to the creator of the list. And from there, you could estimate out the amount of time a student that you work with has contributed. So let's say they did Debris Tracker 5 times since viewing that list. On average, it takes about 10 minutes to, in my experience, contribute meaningfully to Debris Tracker. You'd be able to say this student did about 50 minutes of community service. So I found that to be a really helpful tool in tracking participation for groups that you're kind of galvanizing to do this project. Catherine, what about you? How have you kind of activated different groups to do Debris Tracker and helped give credit for those contributions?
Yeah, so we've really recently, with our new website update, worked on a list dashboard that gives list owners more access to their user data. And we've also created a new user platform. So when, in addition to your SciStarter contributions, you'll be able to log into the Debris Tracker website and see how many litter items you've collected, what areas you've cleaned them up in, and download and access your own data. So in addition to being open data to researchers, it's also open data to anybody using it, and also you get your own data back. So yeah, there's a lot of ways for that to be really engaging in terms of you can really quantify contributions, quantify how many litter items a group picked up, how many plastic items a group picked up, how many different areas they covered doing cleanup. So there's a lot of really great statistics you can get from this kind of data, and really cool maps you can make as well. Like I said, all the data is openly accessible, so you can download it, you can pull it into Google Map or some other kind of mapping software, and you can, yeah, not just have that kind of number of how many hours contributed, but, you know, really be able to quantify how many areas and where those items were. So there's a lot of really cool statistics and really cool data that you can get out of collecting this kind of information.
Definitely. I think that's an important distinction to make. So if you're interested in more just like, I want to give students credit that they did this project on this date, it might be useful to use those SciStarter kind of high level statistics. And if you want to get like more granular and say, oh my gosh, we picked up this much litter on these days and we tracked this pollution here, then you can dive a little deeper on the open data on the Debris Tracker side. So that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, that's the exciting thing about working with SciSters. They do a great job of aggregating those kind of big contribution statistics that'll give you, those kind of how many hours they worked and how much effort and how many different people, which is great information. But then you can also actually dig into the litter data as kind of a metric of impact, which is exciting. So.
Awesome. And Nancy, I see another question in the chat. Do you want to read it out?
Sure. This is our, if you have other questions, please put them in the chat, but this is one of our last questions that we'll address in our Q&A period for part 1. And this question asks, can you elaborate a bit on identifying and tracking microplastics in waterways in the ocean and what special considerations there are for locating and cleaning these up? And do you know if there are any technologies currently used to clean up microplastics?
Yeah, so I'll do this question backwards and start at the end. Microplastics are really difficult to clean up because they're tiny, because inherently they're very small. And so it's really difficult to pick them up. It's also, as I was talking about earlier, it's really much more difficult to quantify them and count them and characterize them because they're so small. So that's really why we focus on this upstream level. I know in some ways, looking at microplastics in the ocean seems a lot more exciting than counting litter items on the ground. But that upstream level of really looking at the problem before it becomes, a problem in the ocean or in a waterway is really valuable because you're turning off the tap. We're starting upstream. So no, I don't actually know of very many technologies that are used to clean up microplastics. There are some interventions like Mr. Trash Wheel in Boston that pick up macro litter items on rivers before they reach the ocean. There's lots of kind of trash grades and technologies like that can work really well in preventing bigger pieces of plastic from entering the ocean and waterways. But I think we're very much in a turn off the tap scenario where if you're familiar with plastic pollution, you've probably heard this analogy before, but scientists talk about, if your sink was overflowing, would you get a bucket and try to clean up your kitchen, or would you turn off the water spout? And so that's sort of what we're trying to focus on right now, is turning off that spout of the input, because there's so much plastic going into the ocean right now. We really have to stop it at that upstream level before we can really effectively look at cleanup strategies. But the cleanups are really great in terms of the data that they give us. So there are a lot of people who are doing microplastic work in the ocean and waterways. From a scientific perspective, this is more, official science. They collect samples and they use different kinds of characterization methods to be able to figure out what polymer type of those microplastics are, figure out, concentrations and densities. And then there's been some work trying to model flows of microplastic through the ocean and through different rivers. So there is that sort of methodology. And there is also citizen science data being collected on microplastics, which is typically done more on beaches, because you can actually kind of sift microplastics out of the sand and be able to count them, which is a little bit easier than trying to find them in waterways. As you can imagine, it's a little bit of a needle in a haystack activity sometimes. So yeah, there is, I can share a link to that protocol that 5Gyres has developed for tracking microplastics from a citizen science perspective.
Okay, thanks, Catherine, for taking the time today to answer all of our questions. So that sums up our question and answer period. And now I'm going to hand it over to Tess William from the All of Us Research Program to talk about their innovative program.
And actually, Nancy, you were so efficient in asking those questions. We have time for one last one. I saw one came in the chat from Anita. Anita wants to know, when working with a group, there is a chance that their information may overlap, recording the same piece of trash. Is that a problem?
Yeah, so there's a little bit of work that we can do on the back end to make sure that we're not counting the same piece of trash twice. So we can, since we have the GPS coordinates and the time and, what litter item it is, you can do a lot of analysis where you're making sure you're not double counting stuff. However, I would say generally there's a lot of places that have litter in the world. And so, we do have a lot of people contributing data that doesn't overlap. And we do have a lot of people who do cleanups while they're collecting this data. So that's worth mentioning, that that's not a requirement. You definitely don't have to pick up anything while you're recording litter data, especially now, given safety concerns around that. You know, certainly want to be very careful if you do choose to pick up litter items, you know, gloves, trash grabbers. There are lots of options where you don't actually have to touch the trash. However, that is one way to ensure that you're not double counting items. So, you know, if people are picking up and clearing the area and then going back and recording that same area again, you know that what's showing up is new trash versus old trash. But on our side, we're looking at really big patterns around the world of how things are, of how litter is changing and how things are accumulating. So that kind of individual small level overlap is really just not as common on our platform.
Great, thank you so much, Catherine. And thank you to Nancy for facilitating that Q&A. Next up, we have Tess Wilson, who's going to chat with us about the All of Us research program and share about how you all can be part of this exciting precision medicine study. And if you all want to hear more from Catherine, please make sure you stick around for our leadership breakout group that'll start right at 3 o'clock Eastern. But otherwise, take it away, Tess.
Hi, thanks. So today's webinar is brought to you in part by the Network of the National Library of Medicine, NNLM, which is a program of the National Library of Medicine, NLM. And it's also brought to you by the All of Us research program. And I'm here to talk to you for just a little while about what exactly that program is and how you can take part. So the mission of the All of Us research program is to accelerate health research and medical breakthroughs, enabling individualized prevention, treatment, and care for all of us. The goal of the program is to help researchers understand more about why people get sick and why they stay healthy. So by looking for patterns, researchers may learn more about what affects people's health. And the All of Us research program aims to build one of the largest, most diverse data sets of its kind for the purposes of health research, with 1 or more million volunteers nationwide who will sign up to share their information over time. And the goals of the All of Us and National Library of Medicine partnership are to increase the capacity of public library and community-based organization staff to improve health literacy, digital literacy, and participation in scientific research, including citizen science. The National Library of Medicine and All of Us have prioritized citizen science as a focus for engagement activities with and through libraries and community-based organizations. Next slide, please. All of Us is a precision medicine study, but what does that mean? It's a new way of looking at health treatment and prevention as being designed for individuals. This way, doctors can take into account a person's lifestyle, environment, and biological makeup to figure out the best treatment for that individual. So if you're new to the idea of precision medicine, it's one way that researchers are looking to advance the ability to serve the public health needs of all people. Next slide. The neat thing is that we already use precision medicine in some ways. And a good example of that is eyeglass prescriptions. Eye doctors can tell us exactly which lenses will work best for us, but when we visit our regular doctor, they may be more likely to prescribe the treatment or prevention that works well for most people. Well, we aren't most people, are we? When a lot of people pitch in to help with this type of research program, we build a large national database to help eliminate one-size-fits-all medicine. Next slide, please. Crowdsourcing and citizen science is an NLM and NIH priority for engagement and outreach. So through citizen science and crowdsourcing, NLM hopes to engage communities in addressing societal needs and accelerating biomedical science, technology, and innovation. We began this work with our partnership with SciStarter to create an online tutorial, provide opportunities to engage in citizen science activities in and through libraries, and choose curated citizen science projects that align with the All of Us engagement priority areas. Collaborations between communities and researchers builds capacity to address problems and meet research goals. Community participation in the research process also builds trust between NNLM and the communities we serve. NNLM is committed to increasing access to citizen science resources to diverse populations in and through libraries and community organizations. NLM and all of us are pleased to provide this opportunity for you to engage and learn more about citizen science. So we hope that you'll stay actively involved and be a part of future events as we continue our work with SciStarter to create an amazing program for Citizen Science Month 2021, which we're already thinking about, of course. We're always thinking about Citizen Science Month. Next slide, please. And one of the great parts about this research is that just about everyone in the US can participate as long as they're over 18, and there are plenty of ways for libraries to participate as well. You can learn more about that at joinallofus.org/NLM, that site on the slide here. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of today's workshop.
Awesome. Thank you, Tess. And everyone, make sure you get that URL down, joinallofus.org/NLM. And Emily also put it in the chat in case you didn't catch it there. And to kind of close us up for our public engagement portion of the session before we get into our leadership breakout, you can discover pretty much all of the resources that we pointed you to today at scistarter.org/NLMs. That's where you can find that Introduction to Citizen Science tutorial in English and Spanish. It's where you can RSVP for the upcoming events in this fall series, including our next one in November, which is Build Your Own Air Quality Sensor with Conario. And that event's actually going to be offered in English and in Spanish. So I'm really pumped for that one on November 18th. Make sure you RSVP for that. And then the last event in this series in December is going to build RNA-based medicines with the Eterna project. And all of the events in this fall series are structured the same way, where our first hour is open to anybody and everybody. It's about how you can participate. And then we have a leadership breakout for 30 minutes after that first hour. So make sure you RSVP for those. And also, as Tess mentioned, we are planning for Citizen Science Month 2021. That is this coming April. If you're part of a library or a community-based organization, we urge you to go ahead, make a SciStarter account on this page, share the scistarter.org/NLM page with your library patrons and your community for your community-based organization. And they can make their SciStarter accounts, they can discover these featured projects, they can start to RSVP for events, and you can start building community around these collective efforts. And even if you're here, just because you were curious about the project, there are other projects on this page for you to explore. There's stall catchers, there's Eterna, there's Globe at Night where you can monitor light pollution. There's the Crowd the Tap project, which teaches you how to conduct a scratch test on your water pipes to understand if your pipes are made of lead, plastic, or some other material, and so much more. I really couldn't go through all of it. I need a webinar for each project. But if you go on this page, you can explore recordings about those projects, you can get instructions about them, and you can make your SciStarter account and start tracking contributions, the number and frequency of your contributions to all of these different SciStarter affiliate projects. And beyond just this page, you can use the SciStarter Project Finder and our events and tools databases to find different opportunities. There are thousands out there in the world of citizen science, and you'll definitely find something that interests you and makes you excited to move science forward. So if you do nothing else after this event, please go to that scistarter.org/NLM page so you can explore and discover more resources. And we also have an ask for you. We really want you to do this survey. This survey, it isn't the MLACE survey. My colleague Nancy is going to elaborate on that in a second, but this survey is about this event specifically. We, in all of our public programs, we ask you to do these surveys to help us understand how we're doing. And we take your feedback really seriously. If there's something we can do better, oops, I mistyped the link, but Emily typed it in correctly. So use Emily's link in the chat. But if you do this survey and you give us feedback about how we can do better, we take that into account and we act on it in our next event series, our for Citizen Science Month 2021. So this survey is your chance to make your voice heard and communicate with us so we can respond to you. So make sure you do that. And actually, you know, we're wrapping up a little bit early here with our public part of the program. So I think we're going to go ahead and dive right into our facilitator portion. I'm going to pass the mic to my colleague, Emily, now. If you're not interested in the leadership breakout room, this is your cue to exit the webinar, go off and fill out that general event survey. But if you are interested in a leadership breakout, learning about how to do events like this in your community and learning how to facilitate debris tracker with groups, definitely stick around. Someone said the link in the chat is not working. Yes, that second link I put is because I mistyped it. I'm going to retype it. Emily had typed it correctly. Sorry about that. So debris, let's go back. Debris tracker survey. And the MLA survey won't be available at the end until the end of the leadership breakout, because that leadership breakout will give you the full hour-and-a-half of MLA CE credit. So the link in the chat is correct now for you to fill out this general event survey. For those of you who aren't interested in the leadership breakout, we'll see you at the next event. For those of you who are, we're going to go ahead and jump in. So I'm going to pass the mic to my colleague, Emily, who's going to talk about facilitating public events in libraries and community-based organizations, CBOs. She's going to give some general best practices for both in-person and online events. Emily, take it away.
All right, thanks, Caroline. So there are many things to consider when you're planning or facilitating a public program. I've listed a few things on this slide. This isn't everything to consider, but just a few starting places for you. So first, think about the audience. Who's going to come to your program, or who do you want to come to your program? When you're planning, you can consider partnering with a local organization, maybe a school, a library, or a senior center. Partnering can increase community buy-in and attendance, and depending on your partner, it could help you share some of the cost of your planning, or your cost and your planning for the program. Next, consider the technology. What's required to participate in the citizen science project? Do you need internet access, a mobile device, or other technology? And when thinking about your audience, do they have access to the technology that they need to participate? And if they don't have access, is technology going to be provided during the program so that they can participate in the project? Funding, as you all well know, is definitely always a challenge. I encourage you to look to the network of the National Library of Medicine for possible grant opportunities for health programming and citizen science programming in libraries and community organizations. Next, think about your time and the location. So what time of day are you going to host the program? Is it going to be a one-time program, or is it going to be ongoing? Are you going to host the program in person, or I'm sure many of you are hosting your programming virtually these days. If you're hosting it virtually, we have a few tips on the next slide for you for virtual programming. And I highly recommend downloading this Librarian's Guide to Citizen Science, Understanding Planning and Sustaining Ongoing Engagement in Citizen Science at your library. This provides more in-depth information about planning an event with citizen science. And even if you're not a librarian or you don't work in a library, there are still some amazing tips in this guide, so I recommend checking it out. So next, during the event, talk to the people who are there. How did they hear about the event, or why are they interested in that topic? Pay close attention to the questions that attendees are asking during the event. So if you're doing an event about debris tracker, are people asking questions about the environment and their community? Or are they asking lots of questions about citizen science and how to get more involved in this project and other projects? So paying attention to the questions that people are asking can help inform your future programming. During the event, you might want to offer a handout that provides information both about the project and then other resources as well, so that everyone leaves the event with some next steps. After the event, it's important to take some time to reflect. So think about what was successful and what made it successful. And also think about what you might do differently next time. It can be helpful to write this down. I know when I'm planning an event, right after the event, all of these questions are on my mind. But then maybe a month later when I'm doing the next event, thinking about what was successful or what I wanted to do differently might have left my mind. Okay, and now I'm going to turn it back over to Caroline for facilitating online programming.
Yeah, thank you so much, Emily. And actually, so we actually changed the name of the Librarian's Guide to Citizen Science to the Library and Community Guide to Citizen Science. So we update that guide frequently. It's the SciStarter team and our partners like NNLM. So make sure you keep on checking back on SciStarter for updated resources, because that guide changes pretty frequently, almost every quarter, as we learn more and more about this type of work. And as big things like virtual programming grow and develop, we make sure the guide grows and develops with it. So it's about a 50-page PDF that you can download and peruse at your leisure. And that's also available, I'll put the link in the chat, on the scistarter.org/library-resources page. That's one of the places where we update the guide pretty frequently, but you can also find it on the NLM side and a bunch of other places too. We just want this guide to be useful for people and something that you can discover. So I'm going to go to the next slide. So let me do that. So facilitating online citizen science in groups. So the big thing to know about this is there's no one size fits all. There's no right way or wrong way to do it. You just have to do what works for your community. These are some tips that have worked for us that we found useful, but you may do something different and you may experiment with this format, and that's okay. You can do whatever works for you. So some things that help are having a location that's quiet and free of distractions. If you're going to be on video, making sure your lighting is on point, that people are able to see your face. If you're not going to be on video, so for example, for this event, because we have American Sign Language interpreters, our videos are off so we can spotlight our ASL interpreter videos. So you just kind of have to do what works best for you in terms of the context of your event and what you're trying to accomplish. But if you are on video, just make sure that lighting is good to go and people can see you. And you can always test that ahead of time with a breakout session. We also recommend audio, doing a sound check before the event. I know that I sometimes seem paranoid to my colleagues, but I always ask them to get on at least 30 minutes early so we can make sure everyone sounds good, that there aren't any last minute emergencies, and we always have a backup plan. So you have to have a buddy. So my colleague Robin from the SciStarter team, she's always here just in case anything happens to my internet connection or my ability to share slides. She could step in. She and I work together really closely to make sure that she knows where the slides are, what the talking points are for the event, what to cover. So if anything happened to me, she'd be able to step in and make sure the show could go on. So always have your buddy when you're doing these online events. And then screen image, making sure that people can see you, that's at an angle where the backdrop is hopefully like a wall behind you, or if you're outside, a nice outdoor background, just making sure that you like the backdrop. And then internet strong bandwidth support is really key. At home, I actually use a booster. That has helped me immensely, having that booster in my home to make sure my internet is as good as it could be. But you just have to acknowledge that it will never be perfect. With each event, there's something you might want to change or learn from. And that's something that we do at SciStarter as well, and why we're so transparent with the surveys we send you all, because we are looking for your feedback so we can be better. I touched on production support a little bit, but really just have your buddies with you. Robin has been monitoring the YouTube live stream this whole time. Just in case anyone had comments on YouTube, she can copy and paste them into the Zoom chat. That is so immensely helpful. So I can focus on the logistics of spotlighting different videos, making sure the slides are being shared and things like that. Also, having production support other people as panelists in your event helps with, maybe dropping inappropriate viewers. If someone's like spamming the chat, one of your buddies could help kick them out of the Zoom. And they can also help engage with people and answer questions during the event. I've seen different facilitators who we've had on the line on our panelist team communicating with you in the chat during this event and answering questions. So for example, earlier, someone asked a question about MLACE credit, and without having to interrupt the event and answer the question out loud, Emily replied directly back to her in the chat. That is immensely helpful in terms of production support. And of course, always have backup, always have people who can fill in for you, and make sure everyone's on the same page so everyone knows what's going to happen during these events. You know, engaging with the audience, there are different ways to do this, and different platforms might work for different people. On SciStarter, we have our Zoom webinar account, which allows us to host up to 500 people in an event. And I really like it because most people are pretty familiar with Zoom at this point. So they're familiar with downloading the app on their PC, their Mac, or their tablet, or their smartphone. But you may have a community that isn't as familiar with Zoom, or maybe that would be a barrier to entry for them. So you might just do a phone-only event where people just call in via audio if that's what they're more comfortable with. Or maybe you're trying to bridge the digital divide so you could have people meet up in a socially distant setting, maybe outside of the library, for example, and you could deliver the material that way or play an event on a live stream. You have to do what works best for you. Maybe you don't have the resources to have a whole Zoom webinar account, so you use Google Hangouts instead, or some other platform. Different platforms work best for different contexts. You just have to figure out what the goals of your event are. We tend to use the Zoom webinar function because, as you can see from this event, it's more presentation oriented, and we don't really need communication beyond the chat to accomplish the goals of answering your questions. But if we wanted it to be more interactive, we might do a Zoom meeting where you're all on camera and you all have sound, as opposed to a Zoom webinar. So really, it's just what works best for you and what your goals are. Make sure you lay those out very firmly at the beginning of the event. Before you start anything else, just figure out what you want people to walk away with and what platform will help you do that best. And so for this event, for example, what I wanted you to walk away with was an understanding of what citizen science is, an understanding of how to participate in Debris Tracker, hopefully some excitement about participating in this. And for those of you sticking around for the leadership breakout session, I was hoping that you'd walk away with some tips and tricks for activating your communities in this work, for you to be a leader and get others to monitor plastic pollution with citizen science. So those were our big call to actions. And we had kind of one keynote link. You know, we've been linking to different stuff throughout, but if you didn't catch any of those, you'd still have the scistarter.org/NLM page that you could go back to as kind of your North Star. That points you in the right direction. That's the page to go to access a bunch of different resources. So it's good to not confuse people and have one clear call to action and some different goals for the event, just to make sure you have that clarity and you're not trying to do too much. You don't want to confuse folks. I'm actually going to switch our interpreters as an example of logistics. So let's see, let's spotlight Kelsey, our new ASL interpreter. Thank you so much to both of you for doing this with us today and making our event more accessible. And then some other just quick presentation material, questions and answers. I've seen different, so I love having slides. I'm a very visual learner, and I appreciate having them for the event because I know I like it when I attend webinars to have things to read, but I've seen other people do events where there are no slides and it's more conversational. The Museum of Life and Science in Durham, North Carolina just did the phenomenal event series where nobody had slides. They were just conversations, but because they did it in this format, they were able to have their webinars where people called in on Zoom or looked on YouTube, but they were also able to translate those audio files into a podcast because they knew they wanted that flexibility in formatting. That was how they structured their events, and that's how they had their presentation material. So if you wanted to do something similar, it just depends on what you're asking people to look at or asking people to do. Embedded videos are key. You want to make sure they work. And on Zoom, you can actually share your computer sound. So that's something to keep in mind logistically. And live demos, even though they can be technically challenging, they can be really rewarding. I often demo the Stall Catchers project when I do citizen science events. So I'll actually pull it up on my screen and analyze with you blood vessels as stalled or flowing. The Debris Tracker project might be a little bit harder to demo. I've done it before when I do events with folks, but if it's raining like it is today where I am in West Palm Beach, Florida, it would be kind of hard for me to go outside on my smartphone and demo Debris Tracker for you all. So we kind of stuck to more of a playing video demos instead sort of format for this project. But it just depends what you're up for and what your audience is expecting. So if you're going to take anything from everything I just said, I hope the main thing you take is enthusiasm is key, flexibility is key, and spontaneity is key. Just please make sure you're having fun during these events. If you're not having fun, the audience can tell and they won't really want to be there. So just make sure that you want to be there and that you're having a good time, and just keep the passion there. We all care about citizen science. We all care about public engagement and research. And if we keep that at the forefront, little technical difficulties won't get in the way of us accomplishing our goal. So I am also going to really quickly, I've hinted at it earlier, but we have our list. So it's a tool on SciStarter where you can add projects onto one page and share them with your community. So the St. Charles Public Library is a great example of lists. They picked out some projects. These were SciStarter affiliate projects that they thought worked really well for their community. So they knew that their volunteers were passionate about plants and animals. They chose the iNaturalist project as one of their featured projects. And they knew that their community was really intrigued by climate and weather, and they've been seeing some unusual weather events. So they spotlighted the IC Change project. And because these are SciStarter affiliate projects, the creator of this list, an awesome librarian named Kimmy Majors, is able to look at the number and the frequency of contributions of people who have viewed her list. And she's able to give volunteers credit for those contributions. She has a lot of teen volunteers participating in these projects, and she's able to track that with this list. We don't have too much time to go over the list. I'm just going to quickly reiterate the SciStarter affiliate process. So as you heard earlier, there are thousands of projects listed on SciStarter, thousands of events, thousands of tools. And it can be a little overwhelming, and it can be a little difficult to track them all. So some projects, about 100 or so, have gone the extra mile to allow you to track the number and frequency of your contribution to those projects and others in your SciStarter dashboard. Each one has deployed this integration a little bit differently. For most projects like IC Change, for example, if you use the same email to sign up on SciStarter and sign up on IC Change, your contributions will automatically track in your dashboard. For Debris Tracker, the way they've set it up is you can actually log in with your SciStarter account on the app, and then all your contributions automatically track. The instructions are pretty clear on the project pages, so you're able to read through it and make sure everything works well. And you can also reiterate that with your volunteers. And you can also add projects to these lists that aren't SciStarter affiliates if you just want your volunteers to discover it and you're not able to track it as much. It's really up to you and what your goals are. But I wanted to let you know that these list tools exist. It's pretty easy to make a list and add projects to your list on the SciStarter project finder as you search different projects and then your SciStarter dashboard. And if you want more details about this, we also have a recent blog post explaining how to make lists that you're welcome to peruse. But the best way to learn how to do this is just by doing it. I would just get in there, make your SciStarter account, and start trying to add projects to your list. And if you're not as concerned about tracking and you just want some all-star projects like Debris Tracker that you can share with your community, just send your community the link to scistarter.org/NLM. You could just have them start doing projects on that page. I also urge you, we love hearing success stories. So if you've made a list or if you have gotten your community to engage in citizen science, send me an email. Let me know how you're doing so I can give you a shout out like I'm giving Kimmy a shout out in our next webinar. We would love to share your efforts to help inspire others. So I'm putting my email in the chat. I urge you to be in touch with me, and I can't wait to hear about all the amazing things you accomplish with your community and you facilitate with your community. So that kind of ends things on the SciStarter side now. I'm going to pass the mic back to Catherine. She's going to be talking about facilitating Debris Tracker in libraries and CBOs and some different success stories in terms of group engagement. So thanks so much, everyone. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so Catherine can start.
Awesome, great. Thanks, Caroline. Those were some great tips. I'm going to talk a little bit about tips for facilitators if you want to do Debris Tracker as one of these projects. So yeah, there's a lot of great citizen science projects out there that you can get people involved in, but I wanted to give you some specific guidance and ideas, advice, if you want to start a project that focuses on using Debris Tracker in your community. So this is what I think the magic recipe is here. So we provide some of these things, accessible technology. The app is free to download. It's available for anybody to use, and this global data set. So people know that they're contributing to this bigger picture across the world. But you have a couple of things we need you guys to provide too if you're going to have a successful debris tracker event in your community. The first of those, I think, is having a community-based goal. So in addition to this global data set that everybody's contributing to, I think it's really valuable for people to think about how debris tracker can use to be informed solutions in your own community, or, you know, promote education, or setting a goal for a number of litter items cleaned up. There's a lot of different ways you can format that, but some kind of goal that's specific to your local area instead of just this big global kind of nebulous data set. And then also a very clear ask of how you want participants to collect data, how often you want to collect data, how what kind of method you want them to follow to do that. So I'll talk a little bit about some options there, and then we can answer some questions as well. So there's a lot of different methods that you can use to collect litter data. I'm going to talk through a few of them here, and you can think about which one might be the best to promote to users in your user group. And that might be different whether you're trying to do an event with kids or trying to promote you know, virtual cleanups for people to do on their own in their own area, or, you know, trying to do a more adult science-centered event. It really depends on what kind of your audience and what your goal is here. So, but I'll run through a few methods for collecting litter data. And again, all of this can be used you can use the Debris Tracker app with all of these different methods, but it's great to establish what kind of way you want people to collect the litter data. We found it really helps to give people some more guidelines around how to collect this data instead of just sending them out with the app. So you can measure out an area. So this can be done using a tape measure, using some kind of measuring tape. You can decide on a typical area. A lot of times 100-meter square pops up as a transect size, but people do a lot of different things. So for example, if you're collecting in a park, you might measure out a specific area and then collect all the data that falls within that area. You can also do a linear transect. So this means instead of, you know, measuring out a square shape that you would collect all the data within, you could collect along a sidewalk, along a roadside, you know, approximately 1 meter wide and say 100 meters long, and collect data along that linear transect. So it, you know, it might not move in a straight line, it might curve with the road, but instead of being a kind of square area, it follows a line down the roadside. We've also done time scavenger hunts, which is a fun way to think about this data collection for kids. So this can be, instead of, you know, trying to do something more formal with a measured transect area, you can have, say, 20 minutes and see how many debris items you find. This can be a really fun way to get kids engaged and get people looking for data in different places. So that time scavenger hunt can be a really fun way to approach that as well. And then you could also do just the number of items. So instead of having you know, a defined area that people collect in, just tell them to track, you know, in a park along a roadside until they reach, say, 25 items. So there's lots of different ways you can frame this, but I do recommend giving people either some options or some specific directions on how you want them to collect their data based on the goals of how you want to use the data. So the other thing I would recommend is setting a time frame. So there's several ways you can do it. You can have a kind of litter blitz where you pick a day or a week and have people go out, you know, in their own area, or, you know, together if possible in a socially distanced way to collect litter in an area. Or you can have a monthly or weekly recurring cleanup. So we also have people who track the same area over time. So either way can provide really valuable data. It really just depends on what kind of local goals you want to attack with this debris tracker data. So a few ideas on how you might use the data in your community. So this can make a really great display because it is, you know, geographic data, but it looks really cool on a map. If you get a good spread of people collecting in different parts of a community, it can really make a very exciting engaging display for education. And that could be, either something that's print out of like kind of physical display or a virtual display. You can link to the map and show people how to explore the data that you've collected in your own community. You could use it for outreach. So this could be reaching out to local policymakers or businesses, showing them what data has been collected in your community and how that ties in to what you're seeing on the ground and what they're using. So I think this kind of local oriented data that's very site specific is really valuable for that kind of outreach, because it's not far removed like beach cleanup data from 100 miles away. It's right in your own backyard. And a really great way to kind of do that outreach can be to engage with students and teachers and getting them to brainstorm the solutions, brainstorm the people to reach out to share the data with. So those are just some ideas of how you might think about using the data and framing your data collection so that it's engaging for people in your community. And again, you guys are the experts. You know what will work best in your own community, what kind of things would be the most engaging for folks in your community. But I really encourage you to think through some of these ideas about how you might use the data and how you might frame the research so that it's most engaging and most accessible for people in your community. You don't want to necessarily ask people to spend 3 hours a week collecting litter data, but if someone was able to do a 30-minute commitment every month, and you could get a really awesome data set that way. I wanted to share this one example of how some people have been using virtual cleanups of sorts for marine debris tracker. So obviously with COVID, a lot of cleanup efforts that typically happen that are, a bunch of people getting together in a group, those aren't happening per usual, but we've had some people doing some really interesting data collection on PPE like gloves and masks that they found littered in their communities. So this is a group of National Geographic explorers and educators that are collecting data in a bunch of different places around the world, mostly in the US and Canada, but in several different states, several different communities that are collecting this type of PPE data. And they're going out and walking the same area every week and recording what they see, which is really exciting. So it's super cool data, and it's a really neat way to be able to engage and be able to collect this valuable data, even in a time when not everybody can be together. But it really does expand options for getting to places that people aren't typically collecting data. It's not just, waterways and coastlines. It's in your own community and seeing what's coming up on the ground and in people's own backyard. So yeah, I'm sharing my contact info and our project contact info here as well. I'll also highlight here that if we're constantly working on developing new resources and new tools for people like you to use in facilitating these type of projects. So if you have any feedback, concerns, or things you'd like to see in the future, do feel free to reach out to me and let me know, and I'll add it to our list of things we're continuing to work on. So I'll stop there and we can have our Q&A.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Yeah, and we have lots of time for Q&A, which is great. We can spend our last few minutes doing that. And it makes me so excited to see the tweet you shared from Peg. I think that's a really good example for any of the folks watching. If you are active on social media, or your library or community-based organization is, tag Debris Tracker on Twitter, tag SciStarter, so we can elevate those posts and keep sharing them out with the global community so other people can be inspired by your work. That's just so exciting to me.
We'll retweet you if you tweet at us. So.
Yes, I love that. And I switched to ASL interpreters for our Q&A section. They're going to help finish us out, and let me skip ahead to get to our Q&A slide. So for the next few minutes, if you have a question, use the chat box or use the Q&A box to enter those in there for Catherine. And the great part about this session is it's the leadership breakout group, so you can ask kind of like the nitty-gritty in the weeds sorts of questions about event facilitation. I'll actually get it started as you all get your questions entered into the chat. So Catherine, I know that in conjunction with National Geographic, Debris Tracker made that journal. And I was wondering how you think the journal that you all made, augments the process or changes the participant experience.
Yeah, so I mentioned in the presentation, but the journal, the Plastic Pollution Action Journal, we really designed that to walk you through the process of how we think about litter as scientists. So how we think about, how to collect that data, and then walking through the data analysis process of what that data means. So I think that's something that's really exciting about Debris Tracker, is that because our data is all open source, the citizen science participation doesn't have to just stop with the data collection. You can really be involved in that data analysis and in, education and solutions in your own community, which I think is really cool. So in addition to contributing to this big global database, you can also start at the local level and do analysis and, creating solutions, creating innovation at that level. So yeah, that Plastic Pollution Action Journal is really a kind of guide to how we as researchers, as engineers, as people who work on the upstream side of plastic pollution, how we think about what litter on the ground means for a community.
That's amazing, and I actually downloaded the journal myself, so I'm excited to use it. And everyone, please get your questions in the chat. This is your time as leaders to ask Catherine anything. I have another question about facilitating Debris Tracker in groups. I know that you shared some examples about the PPE cleanups, but I was wondering if you have other anecdotes of people kind of participating in a socially or physically distant way together, or even just like being part of a community effort without even meeting up during these new public health guidelines that many of us have been experiencing.
Yeah, we've actually had a big influx of projects that did more kind of traditional cleanups that, typically would do a beach cleanup and, a big group of people working together, and that have switched over to Debris Tracker because it allows people to work more remotely. So there's a group up in Canada, the Surfrider Canada organization in Vancouver actually did one earlier this spring that was, instead of their typical big beach cleanup events, they hosted a sort of virtual cleanup, which is the same idea of kind of setting a time frame and setting a goal of how many items and how many participants, and then inviting people to collect data wherever they are in the community. So it's really a great way to be able to share that data and look at that data together as a holistic picture, but you can still keep people separate. So I think kind of organically, you're getting people who are from different parts of the community tracking where it's most convenient or where it's easiest for them. So sort of organically, you're getting a better picture of what plastic pollution looks like across different parts of a community, rather than just having everybody collect data in the same place. So in some ways, it's been a really interesting time for our data collection. We have gotten a lot of people who have switched to this virtual cleanup model by necessity, but then found it to be really good, valuable data as well.
That is awesome. Another quick question for you. So the Debris Tracker project, I love the fact that you have such a focus on like education, and you've been able to put it in different schools. I was wondering if you see like intergenerational participation. Like, do you ever see instances of like students participating alongside, for example, retirees?
Oh, that's a good question. So we've actually recently, as part of our virtual cleanup kind of events, we did a virtual cleanup guide for Morgan Stanley. As I mentioned, they're one of our sponsors now, and they wanted to create a way to help engage their, as part of their corporate social responsibility programs. They do a volunteer month, and they wanted a way to get to engage their employees while they were at home with their families. So we created this guide that kind of encouraged people to do that sort of time scavenger method I was talking about, where you had kids out collecting data with their parents. So that's sort of a common model that we see in terms of intergenerational data collection. But yeah, I mean, it is very open-ended, I guess, in terms of if you wanted to create an event with that kind of framing. I think it's a great way to facilitate connection and collaboration, because you can have a lot of different people contributing the same kind of data.
Great. I think we have time for one more question. So I see one in the chat from Shannon. She wants to know, when you talk about the importance of creating collaborations, can you explain the backstory of how Debris Tracker teamed up with National Geographic, and what were some good lessons learned about the process of forming and maintaining that collaboration?
Yeah, so we worked with National Geographic as part of the Sea to Source expedition that happened last year. So I was actually a member of that expedition team that traveled in India and Bangladesh, and it kind of came about very organically because as kind of a separate part of our research at the University of Georgia, we were using Debris Tracker as a tool and on that National Geographic expedition, and then they wanted to support us with additional resources. And we realized while we were there collecting this data, we didn't want it to be an extractive thing where we were just taking this data out of the community. We wanted to empower the community to be able to collect their own data as well, and be able to continue to collect data after we left. And so that sort of led to working with the National Geographic education and citizen science teams to develop training materials and education materials that we were then able to share in the classroom. So yeah, that's kind of how that came about. As far as good lessons learned in maintaining that collaboration, I would, the National Geographic community is really exciting because they have a lot of explorers and educators working around the world, and a lot of really engaged educators. And so I think it's been very fun to try to take on the challenge of reaching a new group of people. And I think we've been able to develop a lot of really exciting new materials that are definitely applicable in this library context as well, that revolve around education because of that collaboration. So, as I said, we were developed as an education tool, but we've primarily been used for research kind of efforts more than education in the past historically, and they've really helped us kind of move to that next level of being a little bit more accessible, having more tools for people to use Debris Tracker in education events and spread the word a little bit more easily. So yeah, I don't know if that quite answers your question, but it's been a process of adapting and being willing to adapt to change there, and being willing to take criticism on areas that we need to grow in. And I think it's been a really good process of being able to expand our reach through that collaboration and partnership.
Thank you so much, Catherine. I know we're almost out of time, so I don't think we'll be able to get to that last question in the Q&A, but actually we'll try. In this last minute, Michelle wants to know, do you work with the Ocean Conservancy and their beach cleanup?
So we do work with Ocean Conservancy really closely on some of our research projects. The Urban Ocean Project in particular is one that we're working on with them right now. However, they have their own app for cleaning up data. So that app is called CleanSwell. Also a really awesome tool, would highly recommend. They do really great work as well. So yeah, we kind of are partners, but have sort of different goals. I would say Debris Tracker is really geared towards facilitating local data collection. That's really what we try to do. And then Ocean Conservancy has a really broad international reach through their international coastal cleanup. And so, they have this really exciting international audience that's really engaged in their effort and has been engaged for many years. So yeah, we have slightly different twist on the way we tackle it, but their data is also open data, and so is ours. So in some ways, it's very compatible.
Awesome stuff. All right, I think we're out of time. So Nancy, in our last minute, will you tell us how people can get their MLA CE credit if they are so inclined?
For sure. Thanks, Caroline. So before you all go, thanks for all your questions and participation in this webinar. A special thanks goes out to our guest speaker, Catherine Youngblood, for an excellent presentation. The next webinar in our Citizen Science and Libraries webinar series will be Create Your Own Air Quality Sensor with CanAir Rio on November 18th. The links to the webinar evaluation will be provided now in the chat box. I'll do that right now. For those that want the MLA CE, the evaluation will have an MLA CE code for you to use to get your MLA CE credit once you fill out the webinar evaluation. Any questions that you have about the MLACE can be directed to me at nkshin1@uw.edu. I'll put my email address in the chat box as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Nancy. I think we're going to end it here. So everyone will be emailing out all the different links you saw in this webinar, including the 2 different evaluations. Thank you so much. Please use that MLACE link if you are so inclined to get that MLACE credit and to fill out that survey. And just thank you so much to all of our panelists, participants, and partners. We'll talk to you all soon. Bye.